Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to What Behavioral Insight Can Do for You, presented by the Omnia Group. My name is Matt Neighbors, and I am a key relationship manager here. So, before we get started, if you'll notice underneath the presentation, there should be a questions comments box. Feel free to type in any questions or comments that you might have as we go along. I'll address them as we go. Otherwise, let's get started. So, in speaking about behavioral insight, just a little background on what Omnia does, Omnia can do for you, and who we are. Sorry, a little technical difficulty here. There we go. Omnia was established in 1985, so we've been around for quite a while, and we're all predicated on behavior-based selection and management tools, particularly our assessments. So with over 1.3 million behavioral profiles processed thus far, and that's worldwide, we have 30,000 active clients. So when speaking about behavioral insight, let's talk about this guy. Everybody knows this guy. He's the perfect interview candidate. He walks in, he looks sharp, he smiles, he shakes hands, he makes good eye contact. He's really comfortable in his environment, goes through the interview process, answers all the questions enthusiastically, knowledgeably, and he just seems like the perfect hire. So you move forward with him. Well, what happens if Mr. Right doesn't necessarily reach the motivational factors that are necessary for him to be successful at his job? You end up with Mr. 2 months later. This is your guy that got into the job by saying all the right things, doing all the right things, had the experience, the background, but what was lacking? He read a job description, applied for a job, went in and interviewed, came out looking like a shining star, and 2 months later, here he is, unchallenged, unmotivated. And how does he get from point A to point B in just such a short period of time? You know, they say that any hire that you make that doesn't work out within the first 90 days is basically the equivalent of a year's salary that's been invested in time and money and resources to manage that person, just to have them wash out for you to start all over again, going through the same process. So how do you keep from being fooled? Or if not fooled, how do you make sure that you select the right person? Most importantly, how do you retain that person, and how do you keep them motivated and challenged? So based on those two individuals, have you ever wondered if an evil twin switched places with your new hire? You were so confident in Mr. Right, and now you're trying to manage Mr. 2 months later. Must be an evil twin. Have you ever hired someone you really liked who couldn't do the job? Personality is paramount, and it can be deceptive. And in those scenarios where you hire that person that you go with your gut and your instincts and you truly like, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be a top performer or that they're even going to be able to maintain an energy level or a motivational level to continue to produce at the level you're expecting them to. And the candidate that has loads of experience, but then comes in and you watch them struggle. So what are the factors that go into creating that type of an environment? So what does make a great hire? So a great hire is based on a few aspects, and these are just a small sampling because talent, skills, and cultural matches are all imperative. But being able to identify them just through the interview process is not always the most accurate reflection of what that person's going to be capable of accomplishing and the productivity level that they're going to be able to maintain throughout the course of their employment. So, best hiring practices put you in a much better position to be able to build a foundation, develop the foundation, gain the knowledge about the person that you're interviewing, the candidate that's for hire, and gives you a good basis to support your decision to actually hire this candidate. So we start with our Omnia profile, which is based on behavioral characteristics, and that behavioral insight is what is going to give you the opportunity to build the foundation. We do this by targeting specific behavioral categories and then aligning them to targeted benchmarks that are specific for the positions that you're looking to hire. So this isn't a personality profile, it's a behavioral assessment. We're not going to assign you a color. We're not going to tell you that you're this type of person or you're these initials. What we're going to do is we're going to give you very specific behavioral characteristics that are identified by the candidate themselves based on two categories: how they view themselves in the workplace and how they feel that others view them in the workplace. But that's only 25%. And that means that we are not the end all be all, and we don't want to be the end all be all, because our behavioral assessments are not going to measure things like hard skills and experience and education and all of the other aspects that are going to come into play when you're going through the process of interviewing the candidate. So what other factors make that difference? Well, 30% of it becomes the interview impression. And starting with whatever your process is, and process is paramount. If you have a solid hiring process, then you can put your candidates in a great position by narrowing the talent pool through the assessment targeted specifically at the job and how the candidate lines up. And then the interview impression. You can start with the phone screen and the impression that you get from the phone screen. These steps help you narrow down that pool even more. So 5% of it is background drug tests. Some candidates are unfortunately going to be weeded out through that process as well. 15% of it is from references. References can give you valuable insight into how the candidate performed on a daily basis when they were under their supervision. So getting that kind of inside knowledge is a reflection of the investment that you're willing to make to go out and take all the steps necessary in order to make sure that you have the right candidate in place. And 25% of it is education and work experience. So you want to bring in the right person, and that person needs to have a certain set of skills, and that's usually based on education and work experience. From that point, retention and development begin based on developing motivational strategies and coaching techniques that are going to be specific to that person. And that brings you back around to the behavioral assessment. Motivational strategies, coaching techniques, those are included in the assessment. So it gives you not only the foundation, but then the ability to develop retention protocols that are going to be successful for making sure that your candidates stay motivated, are highly productive, and ultimately become top performers within the organization. So how do we do this? It begins obviously with the process. So the process starts with the recruitment. Recruitment is from the onset and goes through the onboarding process. It gives you the ability to identify the characteristics of that candidate, to be able to work with them, to maintain their motivation, but it really gives you the ability to identify who is the right person for the right position. Engagement. Once they're in, it's about trust and clarity. It's about empowering your employees to be able to utilize their natural talents and skills to be able to take initiative when it's called for and appropriate within the guidelines of the policies that the company has in place. Giving them that empowerment through engaging with them, through being transparent, developing trust, those are the aspects that are going to make them feel as though they're part of the organization, feel as though they're part of the family, part of the team. And then development. There should always be ongoing initiatives that are specific to developing your employees. We learn something new every single day. So why shouldn't we be focusing on learning something new that is specifically beneficial to the organization every single day? So creating that training and development program that continues that learning process gives them the ability to be able to maintain that motivation because they're engaged. They're constantly involved and they're learning more and more as they go. So, based on those basic hiring practices and identifying the right position, right person for the right position, our behavioral assessment identifies behavioral characteristics in 4 categories: communication style, assertiveness, pace and adaptability, and need for structure. And I should say that assertiveness and communication style should be flip-flopped because I'll show you in a moment our column layouts. But these are the 4 primary aspects. Assertiveness is going to tell you whether somebody has a level of assertiveness that indicates that they're going to be a beneficial person for a sales position or a leadership position, whereas versus your more supportive, cautious, helpful, team-oriented personality. And I'll go through each one of these here in a minute, but just so that you have an idea of how these work and what we're measuring, these are the categories. And the way that the columns work is as reciprocals of each other. So as one column goes higher, the other one goes lower. So what you end up with is an 8-column graph with 4 subsets of reciprocal columns. One goes up, the other goes down. They can be even in the middle, but you're never going to see too high or too low. So the columns specifically, in dealing with columns 1 and 2, we're talking about level of assertiveness. So your your column 1 individual is your me-oriented person. They're proactive, they're competitive, they take initiative, they're decisive, they're self-starting, and they enjoy a challenge. Your column 2s are going to be more of your we-oriented people. They're going to be very team-oriented. They're going to be very focused on what kind of support they can provide and how they can make the most of being a part of the team by supporting the efforts of everybody around them. So they're going to be very collaborative, they're going to be consultative, they're going to be supportive. They're also going to be cautious. They're not going to be comfortable in confrontational situations. Your column 1 people are generally, as I mentioned, more along the lines of your leadership, your sales, the people that are going to be money driven. They're going to be focused on the next goal and how to accomplish it. And they're going to want to keep striving and keep working. Your column 2 people are going to have that same work ethic, but they're going to approach it from a different perspective because they feel that their most beneficial role and the role that they're comfortable in is the one that allows them to provide that support. So thinking customer service, where they're working with a lot of people on the phone and they need to build those relationships. So having that consultative approach and that supportive approach to things gives them the ability to really be able to relate with the clients that they're working with on a daily basis. So coaching columns 1 and 2. In coaching at column 1, you want to make sure that under times of stress, fatigue, distraction, whatever the case may be, that their assertiveness doesn't escalate to the level of aggressiveness. That aggressiveness can create confrontation, and it can also create a toxic office environment because it makes so many people uncomfortable. But this is unintentional. So it's the level of assertiveness and being able to identify that gives you the ability to coach them to manage that assertiveness and keep it at a level that doesn't come across as being too aggressive. And another way that you can coach them is and keep them motivated is through recognition. They love to be recognized. They love to be called out and given credit for their accomplishments. They love to be able to see the results, and giving them those individual recognitions gives them the ability to feel as though they are accomplishing what they're setting out to accomplish, that they're focused and they're goal driven and they're motivated, and that recognition just gives them even more motivation and keeps them fired up and keeps them moving forward. Whereas coaching that column two is going to be very different because it needs to be based on very realistic, safe goals, things that don't require them to step outside of their comfort zone. So if you're asking a customer service representative to cross sell, you're not necessarily going to be putting them in a very comfortable position. So identifying that aspect gives you the ability to be able to coach them on some sales techniques that they can utilize that are within their comfort zone. So if they maintain that comfort zone of being able to be cautious and supportive and helpful, but then suggestive in their selling strategy, then it gives them the ability to not feel as though they have to press for the business, because asking for business is going to be something that they're going to have a difficult time broaching. So it also is encouraged to coach them by having them observe others so that they can get different perspectives. Negotiating techniques are difficult, and everybody has their own process and their own way of going about negotiating, and some people are much more comfortable with it than other people are. But everybody can be capable of it if they're given the right environment, the right motivation, and the right coaching. In order to do this, for a column two that is struggling in a certain aspect of the position that might require a little more assertiveness, giving them access to other top performers gives them the ability to learn new techniques from these different perspectives, and it gives them the ability to be able to take the pieces that they feel they can actually utilize and are comfortable utilizing and take it back to their desk with them so that they can start to implement them, and then you'll be able to see the results through the productivity. Columns 3 and 4 measure communication style. So your column 3 is your socially assertive individual. There's somebody they're very sociable, very outgoing, very comfortable in all social settings. They develop rapport, they build relationships, and they're very comfortable in making themselves the life of the party. Whereas your column 4 is more of your analytical thinker. Think more of your processor. So what they want is they want the proof and they want the answers, and they want to take all of that and they want to process it. They're going to listen and observe to do that. And in order to get the proof and the answers by listening and observing, they're then going to take it all in and process it. They're going to give it their opinion, their take on things, and then they're going to feel comfortable communicating. They're also very objective decision makers, and that's based on that ability to listen and observe, gather the proof and the evidence and the answers, process the information, and then make a decision, versus your column 3, which is more of your intuitive decision makers. So that they're primed and ready to make a decision. They'll go with their gut, and they're comfortable doing that. So I like to think of the column 3s and column 4s in a social setting as your column 3 being the type of person that walks into a party where they don't know anybody, sees a group of people over there talking, and walks right up, perfectly comfortable, jumping into the conversation, introducing themselves, and joining the conversation and actually participating. Whereas your column 4 walks into that same party and they are going to sit back a little bit because they don't know anybody there. So if they're going to sit back a little bit, then they're going to kind of eavesdrop. They want to hear what they're talking about so that they can think about things that they want to talk about in relation to that subject before they actually jump into the conversation. So in those two scenarios, identify what you think is going to be most advantageous to the position that you're hiring for, and then the candidate would be selected based on whether or not it's going to be better for them to be somebody that's outgoing, sociable, and intuitive, or somebody that's going to be a listener, an observer, and somebody that's going to give very objective decisions based on proof and answers. So coaching threes and fours, when you're coaching a column 3, a lot of times the biggest emphasis you're going to need to have is going to be on getting them to listen more than they talk. So they need to ask questions and they need to actively listen. If they're not, then they're dominating the conversation, which is their natural inclination, and they're not getting the information needed to make the most accurate decisions. So to motivate them, again, these are your outgoing, sociable people that want recognition. So commend them for their achievements. Do it in front of their peers. Do it at meetings. Do it at opportunities that give them the ability to feel that recognition, and it makes them feel good about themselves, which motivates them and challenges them to get recognized again. Column fours, on the other hand, when you're coaching them, you need to be very specific about the expectations and the guidelines, but give them a clear chain of command so that they have open lines of communication. So when they have questions, they know exactly where to go to get those questions answered. And by setting up that hierarchy, you give them the ability to feel comfortable in any environment going to the person that they need to go to in order to get the question answered, because they're not going to feel comfortable making that decision on their own. If there's any question in their mind, then they want some sort of validation to give them the answer that they need in order to move forward. And again, like I said, give them very specific expectations. So based on those expectations and how they're performing, give them specific feedback on their performance. Do this in a one-on-one setting. They don't like public recognition. They don't want to be put in a scenario where they have to stand out in front of the crowd and receive commendation for what they're doing. And obviously, conversely, they're not going to want to be called out. Not that anybody wants to be called out for any negative aspects of what's going on, but identifying how that significantly that's going to affect a column 4 versus a column 3 is something that can help you avoid the possibility of putting somebody in an awkward situation that could potentially push them out the door. So if we're talking about retention and development, understanding how to approach communication style with each one of your individuals is imperative. Pace and adaptability are columns 5 and 6. A tall column 5 is somebody that likes variety. They work at a very fast pace. They're very adept at multitasking. They can handle interruptions and changes easily. They're very resilient. And they get bored with too much predictability. So I like to call it controlled chaos, because I'm personally a tall column 5, and I work a whole lot better if I have 10 things going on at one time and I'm having to juggle all of them, keep all those balls in the air and just pluck them out as I prioritize them, get the task done while I'm continuously monitoring everything else that's going on. And that's not a scenario that's necessarily easy for everybody, but for me, that was identifiable very early on in my life when I was still in school. I would always do better when I had 100 things going on and I was playing sports year round and I didn't have time to really do anything. If I let one thing slip by, then everything snowballed. So my ability to multitask and focus my attentions on the priorities at hand gave me the ability to actually be more organized. Not everybody is like that. Your taller column 6s are going to be people that prefer routine. They're going to be much more methodical, and they're going to have a much more task-to-task focused orientation. So meaning they're going to want to start one task and they're going to want to see it through to completion before they begin the next task. So it's one thing at a time. Let me focus my efforts so that I give my 100% and I can make sure that everything is exactly the way that I want it to be before I move on to the next task. Because if my mind starts drifting towards the next task at hand, I'm going to lose the ability to be able to focus on the task that I didn't finish. And then when I get back around to it, it's going to feel like I need to start it all over again. And giving them last minute deadlines is something that's going to cause them a great deal of stress. It's going to make them feel as though they're pressured and rushed and hurried, and it doesn't give them the opportunity to perform at their best. And that's ultimately what we're looking for by identifying all of these categories, all of these behavioral traits, is that we're looking for the ability to be able to increase productivity, maintain it, and develop it so that it continues to grow. So coaching 5 and 6, coaching at column 5, slow them down if you can to a certain degree, but don't take away their ability to rely on their natural inclination to be a multitasker and to work at a really fast pace. Establish goals that are quickly achievable because they're going to want to move fast. They're going to want to go from one to the next to the next to the next because they're going to think that they're missing something if they don't have all of these things going on. So if you give them long-term goals, long drawn out sales cycles, for example, tall column 5s might not be your best approach for that type of a situation because you're going to put them in a position where they're going to become impatient. And that impatience, that really fast pace going to impatience, means that they're not going to want to stick to it. They're going to lose their motivation, they're going to lose the challenge, and they're not going to be able to continue the productivity that you expect from somebody that's capable of being able to manage as many things as they can. Give them short deadlines and goals that can be quickly achieved, and you'll see much better results. And give them regular opportunities to be able to take advantage of your expertise. So by offering to help them review priorities, it gives you the ability to not only see how their process is working, keep track of where they are in that process, but it ensures that they have an effective follow-up system so that by offering to help them review priorities gives you the ability to engage, and that engagement creates development because that development gives them the opportunity to be able to see that they have resources available because they're not likely to be the type that are going to reach out on their own. They're just going to be taking on too much at too quick a pace, and they're not going to feel as though they have time. So reach out to them. Taller column 6s, when coaching them, allow them to follow a routine. So if you're allowing them to focus on one objective at a time, you're giving them the ability to be able to work at a methodical pace, which is what they prefer. Sometimes you have to slow down to go faster. And I know that everybody's heard that and that it's cliche, the old golf swing, everybody that plays golf knows that if you go out there and you swing it as hard as you can and you try and kill it, you're going to slice it 3 fairways over, or and you're just going to lose that ball. But if you slow down your swing, it's one of the first things that instructors will tell you. Slow down, and you're going to send the ball in a straighter line. So if that's the case, then productivity can be managed just as effectively at a more methodical pace if that's the pace that the person is comfortable with, because they're going to be able to keep their task orientation and give them and dedicate the time that they feel is necessary to be able to produce, which means that they're going to be slowing down to move faster. And you'll see that the productivity produces the results that you want. And introduce changes slowly to them. You have to give them time to prepare because change throws off their routine. Remember, these people are all about routine. They're all about the methodical approach to things, and they create a system and a process that they prefer to follow. So if you give them a sudden change, something that's out of the blue and unexpected, it gives them a panicked feeling. You know, put yourself in their shoes and understand that not everybody performs at the same pace that you do. So by identifying that they need a little bit more me methodical approach to things, then introducing change to them at a slower pace is going to give them more time to prepare and give them the ability to be able to move forward. So with that being said, we're moving on to columns 7 and 8. Columns 7 and 8 are your need for structure. Need for structure can sometimes be hard to identify. That's why it's so valuable to have a resource like this tool, because you're not always going to know whether somebody is comfortable in a certain situation where there's a lot of structure involved. For example, I was in the Marine Corps, and so highly structured environment, and everything's by the numbers, literally by the numbers. Lacing up your boots. Okay, take the right shoestring, put it through the left hole, left shoestring over the right shoestring through the next hole. I mean, extremely structured. Did that for almost 5 years. But I'm naturally a taller column 7, which means that I'm more inclined to be independent. I'm more inclined to be decisive and big pictures, self-managing, resilient. I can handle those types of situations. So I could be a bit of a chameleon because you might not know what my comfort level is. You might not know whether I was born and raised and naturally became an independent person because my my mother was a single mother, working 2 jobs, raising 2 kids, and I had to take responsibility for not only myself but my little sister. That independence was ingrained in me from a very young age, and I've taken it with me throughout the course of my life. So what did I struggle more with? Do I struggle more with the independence or the structure? I struggle with the structure. That was the biggest thing about the Marine Corps that stood out to me, was the fact that I had to abide by this highly structured environment. And I knew going into it what I was getting into, but it was just a matter of being able to accommodate myself and being able to adapt to my environment. So that adaptability is part of the taller column 5 that I am. But when it comes to independence, it's important to be able to identify, because this is one that you're not necessarily going to be able to identify just through a conversation in an interview process. You have to be straightforward with people. You have to let them know what the expectations are for the position. Are you interviewing somebody that's got a ton of outside sales experience for an inside sales role where they're going to be with a headset on, sitting at a desk, making calls all day long? Not necessarily going to end up with the most comfortable position for that person. Your column 8 likes structure. They like that structure. They need to know what the expectations are. They need clear guidelines and protocols so that they can follow them and they can know exactly what is expected of them. They are highly detail oriented and they are very accurate based on that attention to detail. They can self-manage within guidelines as long as they know what the guidelines are. So again, that goes back to giving them the very specific set of expectations so that they understand that that's what they can do within those guidelines, and they'll be able to make more independent decisions because they have that knowledge in hand. They're very quality conscious. They put a great deal of emphasis on quality over quantity. They want to give the best experience to their clients that they possibly can. They want to give them the best service. They want to be as supportive as possible. They want to give them they want to take care of all the attention to detail. They want to ask all the right questions. They want the quality and the output to represent who they envision themselves to be, and as such envision themselves as part of the organization that they are a part of, and they want that organization to be represented by quality. So coaching 7 and 8s, when you're coaching a tall column 7, Set performance goals with them, not for them. Because taller column sevens are likely to be independent, decisive people that don't want to be micromanaged. They're not going to be comfortable in that type of an environment. And if you're setting the the parameters for them and saying you have to stay within these bounds, then you're going to get pushback. And with that pushback, it's going to create a situation that's uncomfortable for everybody involved. Leadership wants to assert their authority. Management is giving the set performance goals. But this guy's a column seven. And as a taller column seven, that level of independence, any micromanagement or any management or oversight that isn't done in conjunction with them is going to make them feel as though they're being dictated to. And they're not going to appreciate it or be motivated by it. Give them latitude. Give them the ability to take initiative, to improvise in certain areas. We all understand that every company has boundaries and guidelines and protocols. However, within those, you can give them by identifying specific areas where they have the ability to be a little bit more uh, decisive on their own independently. Give them that ability to improvise. Now, you can have your mandates, set the ones that are non-negotiable, but as long as they're in compliance with the non-negotiables, then it's a quid pro quo. You're giving them ample latitude in areas where they feel comfortable, and you're making it very clear to them that these non-negotiables are not things that can be taken advantage of. Coaching a column 8, I want to say one more thing on column 7. As far as coaching them is concerned, focus on accuracy and attention to detail with them. Oftentimes, these are the types of people that are going to hurry through their paperwork. They're not going to like the tedious aspects of what they're doing. They're going to want to be out and about and independent. So, attention to detail can be a struggle for them. So make sure that you're monitoring their accuracy and that you're putting an emphasis on making sure that that's a goal of theirs that they focus on. So coaching your column 8s, help them understand criticism, because criticism isn't it. I know some people don't like the term constructive criticism, but criticism can be constructive. And not everybody that's comfortable with rejection is comfortable with criticism. Let me rephrase that. Column mates are not comfortable with rejection. So without being comfortable with rejection, they're not going to be comfortable with criticism. So don't call them out in front of people necessarily, but remind them not to take it personally. Speak to them one-on-one. Give them the ability to give you feedback on how they feel. What thought process did they utilize to make the decision that they made that caused you to feel as though you needed to make a point and give them some suggestions on that area of opportunity. If they give you that feedback, you can still stick to the non-negotiable and you can still work within the boundaries of giving them the specifics of what it is that they need, because that structure is imperative, but it gives them the ability to kind of let their guard down. They're not going to be as defensive in those types of situations. So give very clear input as to what those expectations are, why they're in place, and how to go about getting it done in the best, most productive, efficient way possible. Your column mates are going to strive for attention to detail and accuracy, and they're going to spend a lot of time on it. So giving them expectations, especially when it comes to time restraints, if you give them enough time and you tell them that these are the parameters, then they're going to accomplish the mission, because that's what the expectations are. If they don't have those expectations, they're going to become disheveled and frustrated. And all of that is going to cause a lack of motivation, and that demotivation is going to create an environment where they're not comfortable. So in the Omnia profile for leadership here, as you can see, It's an online profile, and we target it specifically to a number of different aspects, whether it's the job description, one-on-one conversations with leadership, benchmarks of top performers, and what their column layouts are. And we could take all of that information and create an online assessment, which takes about 15 minutes to complete. Our target reports produce instant results. The results are based on interview questions. The interview questions are based on the results, and the profile is reviewed by a trained analyst. So our client advisor team, our analysts, myself as an account manager, we all work with these profiles on a daily basis to give you the ability to interpret them and implement them as effectively as possible, because this resource is an investment that you've made, and in doing so, you want to make sure that you take advantage of getting the most out of it that you possibly can. So at this point, I will open it up for questions. My contact information is on there so that you can contact me directly if you like, and I'll be happy to spend some time with you to go over anything we've talked about today. But at this time, feel free to chime in if you do have any questions and let me know. I'll do the best that I can to answer them as effectively as possible for you. All right. I don't have any questions coming in, so what I'm going to do is take you to a couple of bullets over here just for future reference. On the upper right-hand side, you'll see that you can download the presentation, and we also have some behavioral questions for interviewing. These are specific to the behavioral categories that were just addressed, and they give you the opportunity to really dive into a little bit more specific aspects of what it is that you're looking for. So for example, if you're looking for a sales representative, then you want to know whether or not they can ask for the business. Well, how are you going to determine that? It's based on asking the right questions, and the right questions are going to be based on their level of assertiveness to be able to ask for the business. So these questions can be extremely useful and helpful for you in going forward, and we have more of those. So if you have something specific or are targeting a specific position, we have more behavioral based questions for interviewing, as well as the fact that on your reports, when you receive them, you will receive interview questions that are specifically targeted to that candidate's columns. So if you've targeted a position in sales and you're looking for a 1357, then you're looking for somebody that's assertive, outgoing, sociable, fast-paced, multitasking, and independent and decisive. If they don't fall within all four of those categories, the questions that we provide to you are going to be specifically to address the areas where they don't line up. So I do have a question now about which industries should use this. Every industry can use this because this is utilized specifically for hiring, not specifically for hiring in a specific industry. Now, with that being said, we have worked extensively with a lot of different industries, and we have created industry standards for position profiles and setups. So whether you're in the RV dealership industry, the insurance industry, the banking industry, I could rattle off probably 100 more different categories of industries that we have clients in. We have position setups that have been based on industry standards that give you the ability to be able to target those positions specifically. So in addition to that, because our assessments are independently written by analysts and they're given, the information is based on the information that you give us and the input that you give us, it gives us the ability to be able to cater to your specific needs. Not every industry has the same type of culture or the same type of environment. They don't all require the same type of technique when it comes to certain aspects. So A sales representative at a car dealership is going to be very different from a sales representative in the pharmaceutical industry. That pharmaceutical rep is going to have to build that relationship over a long period of time. He's going to have to always be comfortable with that level of assertiveness. Whereas that car dealer, the salesman out there is going to be somebody that is a one call close. They're going to need to build that instant rapport. They're going to have to work fast and they're going to have to ask for the business. So identifying which is most appropriate for what industry is what we do. So the short answer to that question is all industries. This can be a beneficial resource and tool for any industry, and we'll work with you to get to that point. All right, so first question, can the downloads be emailed to us? I'm not able to open them at this time. If you got my information off of there, let me see if it's over here. There we go. Just shoot me an email directly, and I'll email you the documents, and that way I don't that way I can get your email address and respond to you. All right, the hiring process. So the question is, should I use this before I interview? The way to approach that is dependent upon your hiring process. The ideal scenario is yes, you want it before the face-to-face interview. And I would say that that's consistent every time. But what you're looking for prior to that, generally the way that we recommend that it be set up is that as soon as they have applied for the position, have them take the assessment. Because you can go ahead and get that done and get it out of the way. And the reason I say that is because you're only charged for the assessments that you use. So based on that, you could have theoretically 1,000 people take the assessment based on responding to a job ad that has the assessment linked to it. And then you can phone screen them. And then you can check their resume. And then you can check their references if you want. If all of that happens before you get to the face-to-face interview, then you can narrow the pool at that point through those aspects, the phone screen, the resume, the experience, the education, all of those, and then you can decide who you want to score. So out of 1,000 people that applied for the job and took the assessment, you've identified 5 viable candidates that you want to consider. Score those 5 assessments, delete the rest, and then you have that foundation to be able to bring them into the face-to-face interview and ask them the questions that are specific to them and give you a little bit more support to your hiring process. Yes, the recording, the question is, can we get a copy of the recording? The recording is going to be on our YouTube channel. So if you search us on YouTube, give us a few days to process it, but you can find it on there. Again, take down my information. If for some reason you have any difficulties getting a copy of the recording or the documents or anything along those lines, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to get you a copy of the recording and the documents, whatever, and any other resources or information that might be helpful to you. So be sure to check out our past webinars on YouTube. We're also on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. You can learn more about behavioral assessments here. But aside from that, thank you everybody so much for participating. I appreciate the questions, and I hope everyone has a terrific Thanksgiving, and I look forward to speaking with you again very soon.